What if everything you know about the beginning of the Bible is incomplete? What if there was an entire world, perhaps even a civilization, that existed before Adam and Eve? Imagine standing at the edge of time itself, peering into a cosmic abyss of forgotten history. Most of us believe the Bible begins with a straightforward account. God created the world, formed man from dust, placed him in Eden, and humanity's story unfolded from there. A simple, clean narrative. But what if I told you that hidden in plain sight, between the very first 2 verses of Genesis, lies one of the most profound mysteries of all sacred texts? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. This is Genesis 1:1, the foundation of creation. Then something strange happens. Verse 2 states, "And the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep." Wait, formless, void, darkness. This doesn't sound like the work of a perfect creator. Why would God's initial creation emerge as a chaotic, empty wasteland shrouded in darkness? Something doesn't add up. In the original Hebrew text, the words used are tohu va-bohu, terms that don't simply mean unfinished. They describe something wasted, ruined, desolate, as if it had already been devastated. These aren't words of pristine creation, but of catastrophic destruction. What if this wasn't the beginning of creation, but the aftermath of something else entirely? What if a cosmic catastrophe of unimaginable proportions occurred between verses 1 and 2, leaving our planet in ruins? Welcome to what theologians call the gap theory, a forbidden chapter of creation that suggests our world was born from the ashes of another. If you're feeling that chill down your spine, this is just the beginning of Revelations. Hit subscribe now to journey with us through the veiled mysteries that mainstream religion doesn't want you to see. The mystery deepens when we examine the exact language of Genesis 1-2. The Hebrew doesn't merely suggest emptiness. It paints a picture of devastation. Tohu va-bohu appears elsewhere in Scripture only when describing catastrophic judgment and utter destruction. The prophet Jeremiah uses these exact words when describing apocalyptic visions. "I looked at the earth, and it was formless and empty, and at the heavens, and their light was gone. I looked, and the fruitful land was a desert." This isn't creation language. It's the language of aftermath. Something cataclysmic happened to transform God's perfect creation into a ruined wasteland. But what could be powerful enough to devastate an entire divine creation? The answer may lie in an ancient rebellion that predates humanity itself. Consider this. In the book of Job, God asks, "Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth, when the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy?" This reveals something profound. Celestial beings already existed, watching as God formed our world. These weren't humans. They were something else, something older. But not all these beings remained loyal to their Creator. Before there was the serpent in Eden, before there was the fall of man, there was another rebellion, one so catastrophic it may have altered the very fabric of creation. Isaiah 14 speaks of a magnificent being called the morning star who declared, "I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will make myself like the Most High." Ezekiel 28 describes him as the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty, who was in Eden, the garden of God. Yet this being, this Lucifer, fell from his exalted position through pride and rebellion. What if this wasn't just spiritual poetry? What if this was a literal account of a cosmic war that erupted in heaven, a war that spilled over into the physical realm and ravaged the original earth? The ancient texts hint at a rebellion of cosmic proportions. A third of heaven's angels joined this uprising against the divine order. The battle that ensued wasn't fought with earthly weapons, but with forces that could unmake creation itself. When Lucifer and his armies were cast down, they didn't fall into empty space. They fell to earth, an earth that may have been inhabited by beings we know nothing about, beings erased from our history and memory by the catastrophe that followed. The pristine world of Genesis 1:1 was plunged into darkness, becoming the wasteland described in Genesis 1:2. An entire chapter of creation, perhaps spanning millions of years, wiped away in a single verse. This cosmic catastrophe theory isn't just speculation. It's supported by whispers throughout Scripture, carefully placed like breadcrumbs for those willing to see. In Jude 1-6, we read of angels who did not keep their positions of authority, but abandoned their proper dwelling. These he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains. Peter speaks of angels that sinned, whom God cast down to hell, delivering them into chains of darkness. These aren't references to some future judgment. They speak of beings already imprisoned, already judged, perhaps those very beings who fell in that ancient rebellion before Adam. The term darkness in Genesis 1-2 isn't just absence of light. The Hebrew word chashik implies a spiritual darkness, a divine judgment. This same word appears throughout Scripture associated with divine wrath and spiritual imprisonment. And then there's the deep, tehom, in Hebrew, over which this darkness brooded. This word appears again in Revelation, describing the bottomless pit where rebellious spirits are bound. Genesis isn't just describing physical geography. It's revealing a prison for fallen celestial beings. The evidence builds. The earth as described in Genesis 1-2 wasn't newly formed. It was a battlefield in ruins, shrouded by divine judgment, awaiting restoration. When Genesis says darkness was over the surface of the deep, it reveals something profound. The Hebrew tehom, translated as deep, isn't merely describing oceans. It's connected to the concept of abyss, a spiritual prison. What if this deep was literally swarming with fallen celestial beings? What if the darkness that covered the earth was their domain, their prison? Revelation speaks of the abyss as the place where fallen angels are confined. What if Genesis 1-2 is showing us this very imprisonment, earth itself becoming their holding cell after the cosmic war? This explains why God's first command in recreation was "Let there be light." This wasn't just physical illumination. It was a declaration of authority over the darkness, over the fallen powers that had claimed dominion over the ruined earth. The light that burst forth on that first day wasn't just for visibility. It was spiritual warfare, the first strike in reclaiming a world that had fallen under enemy occupation. With this understanding, Genesis 1-3:31 transforms before our eyes. This isn't the original creation. It's a divine restoration project. God wasn't creating from nothing. He was rebuilding from ruins. Each day wasn't just about making something new. It was about reclaiming territory from chaos, pushing back darkness, establishing order where rebellion had caused devastation. Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, containing the chaotic waters that symbolize the rebellious powers. Let the earth bring forth grass, restoring life to a planet that had been stripped of it. Each command was a declaration. The rebellion will not stand. Order will triumph over chaos. Light will overcome darkness. And on the sixth day came the masterstroke, a new kind of being, made in God's own image. Not just another creation, but a representative, a viceroy to govern the reclaimed world. Humanity wasn't just created to tend gardens. We were commissioned as caretakers of a world with a dark history, guardians of a planet that had already been a battleground. This explains why the serpent appears so quickly in Eden. The enemy was already there, watching this new creation with ancient jealousy and hatred. Eden wasn't just a paradise. It was a fortress, a divine outpost in a world still haunted by its previous fall. The boundaries of Eden weren't just geographical. They were spiritual barriers, keeping at bay forces that still lingered in the outlying darkness. Adam wasn't just the first man. He was a statement, a divine declaration that this world would have a new ruler, a being loyal to the Creator. This is why the serpent targeted him so quickly, so decisively. Humanity represented everything the fallen forces had lost. We weren't created in innocence so much as we were created in ignorance, unaware that we were stepping into an ongoing war, taking territory once claimed by powers we couldn't comprehend. The fall of man wasn't the beginning of evil on earth. It was simply the newest chapter in a conflict that had already scared the cosmos. When Adam and Eve sinned, they weren't introducing rebellion to a pristine world. They were surrendering newly reclaimed ground back to an enemy who had held it before. The most astonishing revelation in this theory comes from understanding that God wasn't surprised by any of this. Revelation speaks of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world, suggesting that the plan of redemption through Christ existed before creation itself. God didn't create the world, watch it fall, and then hastily devise Plan B. The cross wasn't an emergency response. It was always the plan. God knew what would happen both in the celestial rebellion and in Eden's garden. The creation of humanity, the allowance of temptation, the fall, and the promise of redemption, all were part of an eternal strategy to demonstrate something to all creation: that love and free will would ultimately triumph over force and rebellion. When Genesis 3:15 promises that the seed of the woman would crush the serpent's head, it wasn't just a prophecy about human redemption. It was a declaration that the ancient conflict, the one that had already devastated one world, would finally be resolved. Christ's sacrifice wasn't just for humanity. It was the cosmic checkmate in a game that began before time as we know it. Having disarmed the powers and authorities, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. This understanding transforms how we see ourselves and our world. We aren't just random beings on a random planet. We are participants in a cosmic drama that began in realms beyond our perception. The earth beneath your feet isn't just ancient. It's a memorial to conflicts fought before human eyes existed to witness them. The darkness we experience isn't just absence of light. It's the lingering shadow of an ancient war. And yet, in this seeming tragedy lies profound hope. If God could take a world devastated by celestial rebellion and transform it into a garden, what might he do with your broken life? If he could speak light into primordial darkness, what might his word accomplish in your circumstances? The God who said, "Let there be light," over a ruined cosmos, speaks the same words over ruined hearts. The God who reformed a shattered planet can reshape a shattered soul. Perhaps you feel like Genesis 1-2, formless, empty, shrouded in darkness. Remember what came next. Remember the light that broke through. Remember the voice that turned chaos into cosmos, devastation into beauty. The same God who transformed a battle-scarred world into Eden's garden is still speaking today, still creating, still redeeming, still making all things new.